Hi, everyone, and welcome to the return of Friday Book Bites. I know I've had a fair bit of a hiatus since the last time I chatted with you, but that's okay. We are back now, and I'm very, very excited today to have the wonderful Dinuka McKenzie joining me. Hi, Dinuka. Welcome to Friday Book Bites.
Hey, Sandy. How you going? Thanks so much for having me. This is very, very cool. I'm very excited.
You're very, very welcome. And just to start things off, I'd like to mention that I am coming to everybody today from the lands of the Garigal people from the Ku-ring-gai Nation. Where are you coming to us from today, Dinuka?
Yes, I'm coming to you from beautiful Darwin country, and I do want to also pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and and extend that respect, I guess, to all First Nations people from all the lands from which we might be viewing today. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, Dinuka, before we get into it, I'm just going to pop up the details of the giveaway because I always forget this if I don't do it straight off the bat. Yes. So for anyone who leaves a comment or asks a question, whether you are watching it live now with us or whether you are watching it back a little bit later, you will go in the draw to win a copy of Dinuka's wonderful debut novel, The Torrent. And here is here. I read this a couple of weeks ago now because I was lucky enough to have an advance copy, and it was a rollicking great read. So make sure you do leave a comment or ask a question. And if you are watching this back later, Dinuka and I can always pop in at any point and answer those questions you might have, even if you haven't been able to catch this on the live stream. And the giveaway will stay open until 5 o'clock Saturday night, Sydney time. All right, all of that's out of the way now. We've got a hello from Cassie Hamer. Hi, Cassie. How are you?
Cassie.
And a hello from one of my regulars, Yvonne. Nice to see you again, Yvonne. And Jodie is joining us as well. Lovely to see all of you ladies here. Now, Dinuka, we first met a few years ago now. I'm thinking 2019.
Yeah, I think it was. Yes. Yes.
And I was a guest at the Sutherland branch of the Fellowship of Australian Writers, which you are a member of. And I came and did a talk, and I also gave the group a writing task. Do you remember what that writing task was?
Oh, God, you put me on the spot. I thought you were going to say, I remember when we chatted afterwards, and I was like, yes, I do remember that. No, I don't remember the writing task.
I remember what it was. It was to write from the place of senses, to use touch and taste and smell. Yeah. And I remember at that time, because we didn't know each other before then, and I got everybody to read out their pieces that they wrote. And I remember when you read yours out and I went, aha, that one's got it. And then we became friends after that. And now here you are with your wonderful book out in the world.
I know. And I remember because I was just getting on social media, and I remember I think I had you were my first Twitter follower because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you please follow me? And you were like, yep, here you go. And so I had one Twitter follower, and that was you, Sandy, because yes.
But I remember somewhere.
Exactly. That is so true. And I remember, after you did your chat, I sat down, I was kneeling next to you. I'm like, look, here's where I'm up to with my writing journey. And you were so generous, and you sat there for I think, 10 minutes, and you just went through all the things I could possibly do. And yeah, that was amazing. So I remember that, definitely. I don't remember the writing exercise, isn't that?
No, that's okay. But speaking of Twitter, that's actually what we're here to talk about today. Not Twitter itself, but the publicity side of writing, and in particular being a debut. Before I hit you with my first question, there's a couple of more hellos. Sal Gallagher, who is also a member of that Fellowship of Australian Writers group that we just mentioned. Hi, Sal. Tracy is here, another one of my regulars. Kim says hello to both of us. Karen is here. Don't worry, Karen, that you haven't had a chance to do this for a while. I haven't done this for a while. I've had quite a big break from this. Janine is here. Julie is here. Oh, and Cassie said, what was the exercise? Cassie's one of our writers. And so I told them that they had to think of their what they do first thing in the morning. And rather than say, I got up and I went to the bathroom and I went to the toilet, think of it from the senses. What can you hear? What can you smell? What can you taste? And Dinuka's was a fabulous piece of writing that she did. And
I'll have
Chrissy,
to look it up now, Sandy. Now I'm like, oh man, I got to go back and look it up. Now I'm like, I should remember this. Why don't I remember this? Okay. I mean, I remember doing the exercise, but I can't remember what I wrote. So now I'm going to look it up.
That's all right. And Cassie said it's a good exercise. It was one that I did very early in my journey, and it was really helpful, I thought. I don't think we're going to get to the questions, Dinuka, because we've got so many people dropping in. It's fantastic. Hi, Joe. It's lovely to see writers supporting writers. It's something that I have found, and I hope you have found it too, Dinuka, that it is just such a beautiful community to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because we were talking about this, I guess, before we went live, and that's very much, I guess, this idea of sort of joining the writing community, and you know, this idea of kind of publicity as a topic, but really, you know, what I've found through my experience is very much kind of leaning and getting supported by this incredible writing community around me. And that's actually that's kind of been built up over the years. You know, it's not something I think you like, if people think that they can sort of join social media when they have a book to sell, it's probably almost too late. You know, I think it's really, you know, looking back, I think it's sort of, you need to join much earlier than that, because, you know, for me, certainly joining Twitter and joining social media and just entering the writing community through that means was a way of learning about the industry and connecting with other writers and connecting with other emerging writers, and just learning about what was there, you know, the opportunities, the book events that are coming up. And then like, you end up meeting these people in real life events. I mean, pre-COVID, obviously, but you know, you end up, you know, actually, you know, meeting these people. And then sort of when sort of 2-3 years down the track, when you've got a book coming out, they all know you and they are kind of there to champion you and support you and kind of rise like this kind of tide kind of around you and kind of support you and very generously give you opportunities through their own networks and whatever. So it is absolutely, I think, if you are kind of joining social media to sell your book, I think it's kind of like, it's not the right, I think it's almost, the best time to join social media is when you don't have anything to sell, because you are actually interested in what's happening in the community, you know. So I think that has been like one of the great kind of joys of kind of this whole journey for me, is the amount of friends, like the proper friends that I've made through that writing community, you know, like first meeting them online and then meeting them at book events and whatever. And then kind of, you become friends with them, you know, because they're interested in the same things that you do and essentially are doing the same, or are trying to do the same kind of things that you're trying to do. So I think it's very much the long game, if you will, you know, so.
Oh, it absolutely is. And if you were joining, you know, the social media rounds just to sell your book, people will see through that immediately.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And it's wonderful to have the friendships that we make as writers. And I was just before this on a Zoom meeting with a whole bunch of other writers that we do every Friday morning. And again, it was that thing, you know, someone was having a rant about, you know, something to do with the industry. And then they apologized. And I was like, no, this is the place to do it, because we are the ones that understand. As much as our families love us and support us, the journey, as you said, is a very long game. We have to start the journey well before we've ever got a book. And having that support of people who know what you're going through is really important.
Yeah. And it's sort of like, it's not an agenda-based thing, you know what I mean? Like, you're not getting in there, that's my agenda to do that. Yeah. It's actually, I mean, you're essentially trying to break into a brand new industry. Or certainly for me, it was, you know, I was trying to get to know, and what better place than to join the community that's interested in the community, interested in the, you know, interested in writing and about writers and writer welfare, and, you know, like, that's their whole world. And that's what I wanted to know about, you know, and get to know sort of the Australian, I guess, landscape, you know, the publishing landscape, you know. So, and certainly I found Twitter, like, in terms of getting to know, okay, here are the upcoming book events, here are the opportunities, the new competitions, That was a really good way of kind of going, okay, well, this is what's available, and one of the advantages of Twitter is that you can lurk. You can just lurk in the background. Certainly when I joined, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and there's a lot of lurking going on until I made a few friends. And sort of,
I think we've all done the lurking.
Yes, lots of lurking.
And as Sal said, and Sal would know as well, being one of the members of the writing community, that they get you in a way that friends can't. And Cassie has left a comment spot on about social media, that you, Dinuka, had developed a wonderful springboard with the Fellowship of Australian Writers, and she's saying words on the wave. I think she's meaning the
Writers Unleashed, yeah.
Writers Unleashed, yeah. So let's get into that a little bit deeper, the whole social media side of things, because I think something that a lot of writers don't understand before their book, before they become an author, is just how much of the publicity is actually on our shoulders as the writers. So as a debut, I wanted to ask what's been involved for you from the publicity side of things. And I've got it into 3 parts. The biggest surprise to you about the publicity side of having a book out, the best part, and the most challenging. I'm not going to say hardest, because I just see them as challenges. So if we forget those 3 things, that's okay. So the biggest surprise to you as a debut author and the publicity that you have to do.
I think the biggest surprise has been sort of like just stepping back, just the amazing reception, because I was like, oh, wow. I just assumed, it'll be there for like a couple of weeks and then, it'll just all go back to normal. But it hasn't. It's just kind of built this momentum, which I'm incredibly grateful for, but I also did not expect in any way, shape or form. So that's been an amazing kind of surprise to me. Just how much people have responded to the book. And I guess, like that dream part of you hopes it, but you don't really expect that. And that's been incredible. I think sort of the most challenging part is, I guess, more the anticipation. I think, certainly, so you work on these events and you kind of go, I've got like a virtual event coming up or whatever. And I think that anticipation and like now I feel much better about it, but certainly at the start, you go from, this isolated thing of writing or certainly you and even with your social media, I guess you have quite a bit of control over it. And then you're sort of, you're out there, it's all virtual, it's all online, it's, there's videos of you everywhere. And you suddenly, like, that is really kind of quite, weird. Because for me, I'm like, oh man, I make a lot of faces when I talk. Far out, that is really awkward. and then people like send you social media pictures of yourself where you go like this and like that, and you're like, yay, thank you. And all that kind of stuff, which is, so you just kind of, it's that thing of, all this stuff, your perfectly curated social media feed is now full of all these things where you're like, and you would just have to let it go. You just have to let that side of it go and realize that actually you there's only a few things you can control. And that's the stuff that I guess, knowing your book, you being able to kind of communicate stuff about your book and you being able to communicate the stuff you want people to know about your book. So that's the stuff you can control. So let's just deal with that part of it. And I am sort of, like personality wise, I like to be kind of fairly well prepared. And by that, I don't mean word for word, because that's obviously doesn't work. But I think you need to, have kind of your elevator pitch kind of worked out in your head. You kind of, I think if you are, again, involved in the writing community, if you've been to events, if you listen to podcasts regularly, you kind of get a feel for the general types of questions you're going to get asked. So the things like, clearly what's your book about, but also, what's your inspirations, the setting, those kind of like the main characters, those kind of things are going to come up all the time. And particularly if you're a debut, advice to other aspiring authors or recommendations of books in your genre, those kind of things are fairly, common. And I think it's worth at least having thought about those issues before you kind of turn up to an interview. So, so I think, like, I wouldn't recommend word for word, but I think you need to have thought about those things. So in the time you have, you get to communicate what your book's about. And certainly, can I just give a plug to Claudine Tonellis, her wonderful, her wonderful course, nailing author interviews. I don't know if she's here in the feed today, but, if you want like a much more articulate explanation of this whole side of things, do that course, because she goes into that about, I guess, the things, authors need to think about in terms of doing interviews, and she really goes into it really well, which is great. So yeah, do that course.
Yeah, Claudine's not with us today. She's traveling today. We were chatting just yesterday. And yeah, she came up with that course because so many, particularly debut authors, but sometimes some experienced authors as well, don't really know those things that you were talking about in terms of being prepared and knowing the sorts of questions that are going to come up. And as she's a brilliant interviewer, Claudine, she's one of the best that there is. And she sort of saw this gap in there. And it's not anyone's fault. I wouldn't have a clue how to talk about my book before I first had to talk about my book. And there's very little out there in terms of guidance. So yeah, that course that she does, Nailing Author Interviews, is fantastic. Bookworm TV have said that they're here for the faces. So I can't tell you how many times I've been caught mid-saying something with the most god-awful voice. Someone always snaps it right then, don't they?
I know, exactly. And it's like your version of how you look good versus what other people think. And then they're like, yeah, they've taken this amazing shot. And I'm like, okay, cool, yay.
Do I really look like that? Yep.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But in saying that, I reckon everyone does that. And I've been on the other end of it where I thought I've taken a really great shot and the author's like, that's a terrible one. So yeah, I totally get it. So yeah, you just have to let that
go. You do. You can't, as you said, you can't control it. We've got a hello from Jem joining us from up in Queensland. Hi, Jem. Hi, Janet, joining us from up my home way in Coffs Harbour. Hope you're dry today, Janet. And Anne is joining us from Sydney as well. So nice to see you all here. And Yvonne has said that this is a lovely way to meet new authors. And this is a form of publicity, isn't it, Dinuka, what we're doing right here, right now?
Yeah. And I think it reflects exactly what we're talking about, because you and I, as we said, like, we met in 2019 when I was still working on a book. There was no hint of publication. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't in sight, right? But you are networking with people in the writing community, and sort of, 3 years down the track, we've remained friends, and, we've kind of now in this kind of publicity sort of thing. And you're very generously kind of sharing that audience that you've built up with me, and that's like sort of this thing about, but again, it's not like an agenda thing where you're like, 3 years ago, I thought, well, I better get to know Sandy Docker because, you know what I mean? It's not like that. You
may have regretted that decision.
Yeah. Well, that's a separate conversation, Sandy.
Yeah, probably not one for public viewing.
That's right. No, but so it's. I mean, I think it's just this. It really reflects the generosity of the writing community. If they see that you are genuinely engaged with the community, that you are giving back as much as you are, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, so if you're interested, you're going to other people's launches, you're sort of interested in other people's journeys, you're reviewing their books, you are part of that community, then everybody is more than willing to kind of, give you that leg up when your book comes up, because for all of us, I mean, it's that, I think, was it Jo Nell who talks about it in her kind of interviews, that, like, we'll all rise with that tide. Like, it's not about, you know what I mean? It's all of us. The more readers there are, all of us will get that. So, so I think this is just an example of it.
It is. And Bookworm TV, who are part of the Australian writing community, is incredible, and the support is always inspiring. Yeah, we love it for sure. Now, social media is obviously one of the really important aspects. It's not the be all and end all of book publicity, but it is an important part of what we do. So did you have any prior experience in using social media before you thought, I better get onto this before I get published, or was it brand new to you?
Oh, that's hilarious. No. in a word, no. So I found social media quite hard because I had literally had 0 social media accounts before I decided to sort of enter social media in terms of like for the purposes of getting to know the writing community. So, you know, and I think this is a decision that every person as an individual takes, you know, and as a writer. But for me, I made a very clear decision right from the very start that, you know, my social media presence will be in relation to my interest in books and writing. And I don't really share sort of, you know, pictures of my kids or that kind of stuff, you know, and that is my line. Like everybody has a different line, and that's, you know, that's entirely up to them. But so my private life, I kind of really quite keep to myself. But there are aspects obviously that you have to come up, that you have to share about your personal life, in the sense that nowadays writing is very much, or, you know, that author life is very much about not only the book, but, you know, your, you know, something about you as well as an author. So I think there are components of yourself that you have to share, and you know, and I think I found that quite difficult to get my head around, to be perfectly honest, because it wasn't something I was used to doing. So, you know, that's why I think for me, I started off with Twitter, because in Twitter you can just talk to people. You don't have to share pictures and things like that. Or when you do share pictures, it can be about books or whatever. So I felt that was for me a transition into social media, whereas Instagram I found quite hard to get my head around, because it is very much content based, and you really have to have this kind of generation of content, which you know, for me at least, it felt sometimes quite artificial. So, you know, like I had to get my head around that, and how you deal with the different social media kind of platforms. And that is a very personal decision. I think that, you know, like no one can tell you, oh, this is the way you should do it, because whatever you do, you have to do something that you're comfortable with, so that it is genuine, because otherwise people know it's not genuine. So the bits that I share are genuine bits of myself, you know? So that's the kind of the point you have to make. And I think, again, at the start, it's very hard because you know no one, or certainly I didn't, you know, because it was such a new thing for me. But once you start getting to know people, it's not because you're sharing their content, you're sharing events, you know, like you build that side of things. But I think when you're first starting, or certainly when I first started, I literally didn't know anything about social media, full stop. And I didn't know anything about, you know, and I was just learning about the writing community. So it was 2 new things that I was trying to navigate. And so I did it slowly. I was mainly on Twitter. I was on Facebook mainly so I could access my kids' school stuff. You know, but you know, mainly in terms of writing, I was mainly on Twitter, and I used that really as a platform to learn about the industry, and then moved on to kind of, I guess, Instagram. I've really only been there for about a year, but it is what I would say, like it is a really quick. Like you get more followers on Instagram. I don't know. It seems to be far more interactive. Like there's more bookstagrammers and stuff like that on Instagram. So yeah, that's certainly, they're far more interested. There's a far more kind of reviewer community, I guess, on Instagram, I've noticed, than say on Twitter, which is more kind of the writing community. Yeah.
Jo has left a comment that she likes that you have to be genuine on socials, and in order to do that, you need to be comfortable with what you're sharing. And as you said, everyone shares different things. There are some authors that go right into the very deep depths of their personal lives. And there are authors like you and I, we very rarely share anything about our children, and it's a personal choice, and that's what we're comfortable with. And we've sort of skirted around this in terms of how much of yourself do you have to share with your readers. And one of the things that we learn very quickly when we first get published is people want to know, is there some sort of personal connection between you and the story that you've told? Right? It's one of the most common questions that we get asked. And if we're looking at your debut, The Torrent, we have the main character is Kate, and she is a police officer, and she's very heavily pregnant, and she's kind of juggling that situation of figuring out where her loyalties lie. Do they lie to the job? Do they lie to her? Do they lie with her family? And I wanted to ask you, is that something that you drew on as a mum yourself, trying to find that balance, to inform Kate's character?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, with this idea of, how much you want to share and all that, like I was very clear that, yes, very much that was based on my experience, only because, my writing experience was, I didn't start writing because I wanted to get published or wanted to, had a dream of writing. I wrote because I needed to carve out a space for myself, in that time and place where I was in the middle of kind of managing kids and work and trying to find that balance, and finding that whole experience quite overwhelming. And I felt like I was kind of losing bits of me, and I needed to kind of find, carve that space out. And in order to do that, I ended up writing because it felt like something achievable or something I could do in the pockets of time you find yourself with. So, I very much just wrote, all the things that I was grappling with, right? And so it wasn't, so now when it comes to, I guess, the publicity trail, I'm very honest about that, because there's no other story apart from the fact that, Kate was very much, me and another guy's, but she has now become herself, she has become her own character. But of course, when I was first writing her, I didn't expect anyone to read it. So therefore I could just be like, oh yeah, and she has a husband and she has 2 kids, because that's what I have, because it literally didn't occur to me to, think about other things in terms of a readership reading it and also asking those questions of you, which you would then have to reply and go, oh yeah, actually, but so in that sense, yes, I guess the characters there. So there's Kate and her husband and 2 kids. And in that sense, yes, that, I'm the same as in that's my family, but those are not the characters, So Kate, I think, is very much dealing with the issues that I am. But I think apart from that, none of the characters are based on actual people, because that would be really weird. Because I could draw my own kind of stuff, but putting actual people in my family into a book, that didn't come, because the whole point was to try and escape that, to try and and people ask me oh, did you think about writing things from your work, and from the environment background that you come from? And I'm like, no, because, the whole point of it is to try and do something different from everyday life. And so it was sort of going into sort of police world and, trying to do something completely different, so, yeah.
I'm going to get back on track with our topic in a minute, but I wanted to pick up on something that you just mentioned then, when you said that when you were writing, Kate, you weren't thinking that anyone was actually going to read this, which is a really lovely space to be in as a writer. You and I were discussing before we came online that now that you're under contract, it's a very different experience. Yes. I'm not going to talk about that, but I wanted to talk about some of the themes that are in The Torrent, because it is a police procedural. Is that how you would classify it? Yes. Yeah, that's how I would classify it. Yes. But it's not just about the policing. There's a lot of really deep thematic stuff going on in here. You cover themes like race, gender, sexuality. There's cutting, there's autism. There's an awful lot of really deep issues that are dealt with in the torrent. And were you conscious of putting that in there when you were writing, that that's a reflection of the real world that we're living in, as opposed to making it a cookie cutter version? Like, were you conscious of all of those issues when you started?
I think I was sort of like, in that first book, like every single idea you've ever had in your entire life, you feel like you need to like jot it down, and so I think, looking back, there was a bit of that going on because, as I said, I think certainly, you're playing in that first draft yet, and certainly I was not only playing, I was learning. I had no idea how to do it, so I was learning the craft at the same time as I was writing. So I was playing, and I had that flexibility of that play, but I was also writing. And I think, it's one of those things like which comes with hindsight, but I think it's all these things that you as a person are interested in. You as a person are kind of interested in issues or are engaging with those issues in your own life, and they intuitively come out when you're writing. So I don't think it was like necessarily a conscious thing, but I think they're just things that I'm interested in and like I see in the world around me, and certainly some of those issues I'm personally grappling with. So they felt like I didn't actually think about it in those terms, in terms of, okay, I am now writing an issue. It was just there, like the characters who, like when you put down a character, they turn out to be the way they are. And that was, and I didn't think about it more than that. And I didn't actually give it, I guess I didn't kind of interrogate it more in those kind of that first kind of putting it down. I guess it's like later, I guess, when I entered the writing community and also, I guess, started thinking about writing like sort of more in the craft sort of sense, and thinking about, characters and things like that, and character development, I guess I started thinking about it far more deeply. And certainly I started thinking about it far more deeply in terms of writing characters outside of my own lived experience, and making sure, like I really did sort of quite a lot of research then, and just made sure that, through sensitivity reads and things like that, to make sure that, I certainly didn't want to get into, like I understood the responsibility of it, because, when you're first writing, I guess you're kind of doing it in your own kind of, sandpit type thing. But then, when you start talking to people in the writing community, and you start kind of dealing with editors and things like that, and you realize kind of the responsibility that you're taking on. So it's a huge kind of thing, and you certainly don't want to write anything that's going to cause harm or perpetuate kind of harmful tropes. So those were things I took really seriously and kind of really kind of tried my very, very best to try and both with research and reading, and then, and getting feedback, in terms of sensitivity reads, to try and make sure that those characters were as three-dimensional as, as realistic as kind of, that they had their place there in the book. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kelly's had a little bit of a giggle. Kelly's a writing coach. Kelly yourself, Dinuka, that it's such a first novel thing to do, is to put all the issues in there. Yes. At once. Very possibly, Kelly, because we're worried we might not ever get to write the second book.
Yes, exactly.
There's a few comments and questions, and I have seen them coming through, everyone. I'm going to come back to them now. Karen has left a comment that she doesn't see much from authors on Twitter, but a lot of great stuff on Insta and Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I know you and I met, or not met. That was our first social media contact. I came off Twitter for very similar reasons to Cassie. I'm just going to pop her comments up. She deleted it to focus on Insta and Facebook. It was great for making connections with other writers, but it can be a very tough political environment. I found it a very angry environment, which is why I came off there. Like Cassie, didn't feel comfortable. Do you have a preferred platform that you like to use?
Look, I think I would say probably Twitter and Instagram. I've definitely got more comfortable with Instagram. I think once I've learned how to use it, because, obviously one of the things I did like about Twitter is that you can easily kind of share other people's content, whereas, obviously Instagram, you got to get separate apps for that. And, and it's a far more, but once you know how to do it, it's far more easier. Like, I totally agree with Cassie in terms of sort of like that political side of Twitter. And I think with Twitter, again, and I do this with Instagram as well, I am very clear with myself that I only follow other writers. Like, I literally do not follow any celebrities. I do not follow politicians. I do not, and to me, again, this idea of, I guess, what line you draw, the people who know me and the people who I'm friends with know my politics, know my know my opinions on things, but I don't feel the need to say that on that platform, because I have made it very clear to myself that what I'm using that platform for is to connect with the publishing industry, full stop, and other writers. That is my goal in being on on Twitter. So, I think with Twitter, you just need to know how to scroll past, because not every conversation is for you, and I think, so I completely understand what Cassie's saying. And, and there are periods when Twitter is incredibly toxic, and I think you can just like leave it alone for a little while. But I tend to use Twitter to essentially have conversations with writers I already know. That's what I use Twitter for. I don't use Twitter for kind of political conversations, because, again, those are conversations I have with my trusted friends, and people I know in real life. So those people who know me know all those things about me already, so, and I think, and I think that's the line I have drawn in terms of separation of my book and my author, public profile, versus what I want to protect for my own personal self, because I think, like, I have made the decision to not share all of me, because I don't think that's fair on me or my family who didn't agree to be part of this journey, if in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, I don't think that's fair on them for me to suddenly go, okay, well, now you're all part of my profile, just because I have decided to take on writing as a thing I want to do. So for that reason, I have been very clear that that's the separation. Again, that is completely different for other people, and that's their decision, and that's a decision they have to make for themselves. But I would very much say I'm getting more used to Instagram. Definitely getting more used to Instagram, and I do, but very recently, probably the last basically week or last 2 weeks, as we were discussing the whole issue of trying to write more, I have actually just turned off all my notifications on my social media, and kind of so that then I have a specific time during the night that I go in and check whatever, messages or whatever I've got during that period, and I can answer them. But there isn't that temptation to just constantly be on it, because I just, because it is a distraction, and it takes away from the writing time. And I think before the book came out, it wasn't so much of an issue, because I could manage that. But now, obviously, and don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful for this. People are obviously tagging me on these incredible reviews that they're doing, and I'm like, oh, wow, that's amazing. But if you let that distract you, and every time ding, 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 like, you're not using the time to write. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people very guilty of the distraction.
It's
something I'm not very good at. Yeah, as Jodie said, setting those boundaries is really important. I'm still working on that myself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know, because I deleted all the shortcuts to all the my social media apps on my phone screen. So now I have to literally go and scroll through all the apps in order to find them, and so that's another way to kind of like added layer of making it hard for myself to get to it.
You and I might have to have a conversation off camera about this, and you can be my guru in that, in that area, because I'm crap at that. Cassie's left a comment. The First Time podcast has a really good rule of thumb for posting when it comes to social media, and that it's an 80-20 rule. And that means that most of your content, the 80%, should be elevating others and 20% promoting your own. The only exception is, which would be right now for you, Dinuka, is, you know, for that launch and promotion time when the balance gets flipped. I've not seen that rule before. I'm going to have to go back through my feed now and just check whether I'm behaving or not.
No, I think you're so right, Cassie. And they talk about it, so well on the First Time pod. And yeah, it's true, because that is, like, again, I kind of use Twitter to find out what's going on and to make sure I'm kind of, promoting those kind of things, because they are all the writers, firstly, who I've got to know and I'm friends with, and and so therefore it's so great to be able to kind of champion their stuff. But they're all the people who are supporting me, and of course I want to support them back. So yeah, so I think I do very much like the retweet button on Twitter. That is one of my favorite things that I do use. But yeah, so no, I totally agree. If you can do that, that's a good rule of thumb. Yeah,
it is, and Joe agrees with that as well, saying that it makes perfect sense. Now, we've got a couple of questions here that I'm going to get to. There's one from Kelly. Is there anything you did when you were writing The Torrent that you would not do in the next one? That's a really good question.
Ooh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Look, I think, what I will say is not so much what I wouldn't do in the next book, but what I realize I have created a bit of a, what's the word? What's that saying? A thing across your back, or whatever that word is. Yes, that's it. Yes. But in the sense that, because I have centered her family so much, in the sense, so I guess in any kind of other kind of mystery procedural or a detective series, you would very much get to end the story at at the end of their day at the police station or whatever, and then they cut back to the next scene where they're back at the station, or what I mean. But I guess for me, because I've set it up that way, I really do have to bookend her day with the kids, because the whole point of it is that we get to center that character. So I absolutely want that. But from a purely craft point of view, of in that murder mystery kind of space where I have to really think about how I don't lose the tension, don't have it sagging when you're getting to those family bits, because I want that to be just as interesting. So don't get me wrong, it's not something I would ever take out. That's not what I'm trying to say. But from purely a craft point of view, if I didn't have that component, it would just be like action. You know what I'm trying to say? Like other writers can do that, because you just go from action scene to action scene, or you can just follow that detective, because they literally don't have to come home. Whereas with Kate, the whole point of Kate is to show a real person's life, or an everyday person's life, a person you recognize, because these are the women around you. So they, like the family is very much an integral part of their life. And the whole point of it was to show that. But I do recognize sometimes when I'm writing, I go, oh yeah, that's right, now I'm going to go back and talk about the kids, type thing. So so purely from a craft point of view, it does, I have to think about it a bit more. Yeah.
And it's the thing that I think, and Jodie mentioned this earlier on in the comments about Kate being so relatable. I think that's the thing that sets your book apart, is that Kate is a real person, and she is a mum, and she's a pregnant mum. And we do see that side of her quite often in the book. And that's something that, all of the women that are watching today, I haven't seen any men pop up in the screen yet. It's only women, and most of us are mums or grandmas or or whatever the case may be. You know, that is our lives, and it is, you can't separate yourself from being that person. And that's one of the beautiful things about Kate. And for me, who's not a traditional crime reader, it's not a genre, it's not my go-to genre to read, I really felt that connection with Kate, that it wasn't just action, action, police, police. This is a real human being, and some, you know, she could be me. I'm not brave enough to be a police officer, but, you know, as a person, she could be any one of us. So I'm so glad that you did put all of that in.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, I guess the traditional trope definitely of crime fiction is very much of, mostly men. I mean, certainly it's changing definitely, but often, very much childless, or if there are children, they're often sort of grown up, or certainly, being looked after by someone else, so that the detective is kind of free to kind of do their thing. So I just, as I said, I mean, the seed of this book from the character of Kate was very much from me trying to grapple with my own, I guess that very intense period, and it's still going, but it's not as intense now that the kids are much older, or a little bit older, of trying to manage work and kids, this career that you've built up over the years, and then making sure you do right by these kids that you've brought into the world, and that you sort of deeply love, and you want to do best by them. And you always feel like you're not doing enough on either side, like you keep going, oh, could be doing a better job on, either side. So then I thought, oh, well, what would that experience look like for a police officer, because the trope is very much of, I guess, the flawed police officer, and the one who's kind of battling a drug addiction, or alcoholism, or whatever. And again, I don't want to sort of like belittle that in any way, because that is the experience of so many police officers. So because it is such a tough job, and that stuff happens all the time. So I certainly don't want to diminish that. I shouldn't, belittle is not the right word, but diminish that in any way. But at the same time, I did want to, for me, I did want to explore the idea of, a normal family just trying to make it, just doing their best to just make it. And then she happened to be a police officer. So what would that look like for her? Because she has to deal with that really full-on challenging world, not only just in terms of the crimes and stuff that she would have to sort of be faced with, but just that profession in general as a place for a woman, and as a place for a person of color, so that and as a place for a pregnant person. So all of that, I mean, I think
there were a few challenges, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. Yeah, poor Kate. So because it is quite a, again, these things are changing, but essentially there will be some quite entrenched views and quite kind of internalized views around the culture of toughness and not showing any weakness and all of that, which are things that Kate has obviously absorbed, and and the reader can see it. The reader can see it, that she's taking it a bit too far, but she has internalized all that stuff, and she does not want to be the one to say, I need special rules, like I'm not good enough to do this. So that's kind of where, like I really wanted to place Kate in terms of a character, and because I wanted to, because like I have police people in my life, like my husband's ex-cop, and his dad was a cop, and and they're coming from families who managed to keep their families together, you know what I mean? And like I said, they did both things, right? So I guess I wanted to kind of honor that side of police people who are doing this very tough job, just like all first responders, because so many first responders are doing this, right? So they've got this really challenging job, but they're still trying to make their families work as well. And I wanted to see that side of a police officer, because I don't think that is very much told as often, let's say. So, so that was an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, and Kelly has commented that making the family side of it work as a subplot, would be challenging, but it definitely enhances the story and makes for a more interesting book. And Janet, who is one of my regular viewers on Friday Book Bites, said that she's going to be very interested to read The Torrent, as she was a police wife for 32 years. And obviously it affects the family in a different way that it affects the police office. So that will be interesting to see what Janet thinks of that.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
there was a question earlier from Cassie, which I saw pop in. I've just got to find it again. Here we are. And then after this, I'll ask you one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up because otherwise we'll be here all afternoon, which is fine by me. But I can't really keep you for that long. So you are, congratulations, Dinuka, going to be on a panel at the Sydney Writers Festival with Jane Caro. And at Brisbane Writers Festival with Brian Brown. There's some pretty big names there. She knows that you will hold your own, but if it were her, she would have serious imposter syndrome. Do you have any particular methods to control your nerves in these situations?
Oh man, Cassie, like, you know, when because we've literally had a Facebook conversation about this, and I'm like, oh man, I'm so freaking out. Yes, and going back to, I think, circling back to that question about what was the most challenging thing, which I don't think I answered, but yes, this will be the most challenging thing to find out, like, which is obviously this extraordinary honor, and like so incredibly grateful to be given the opportunity, but also I am completely freaking out. Of course I am. You know, I mean, it's like Brian Brown. And the thing with the whole Brian Brown thing was, you know, like, I got the invite and I didn't, like, they didn't necessarily tell me who was, you know, they said I was going to be in a panel, and then it was on the website and I was like, holy crap, it's Brian Brown. Like, oh man. So yeah, so I was, yeah, you know, yeah, so that was a bit of a freak out. Look, Cassie, can we come back to that after I've done it, and I will tell you exactly how I dealt with it, i.e. not, yeah, or not, because I think it's probably too early to think about it right now. At the moment, I'm just avoiding it. No, not avoiding it, but, you know, I'm just like, you know, certainly all I can tell you is what I've done, like, for virtual events and stuff I've had to do so far, and that is, you know, certainly right at the start, I'm not, you know, I've got more used to it now, but certainly right at the start, I used to sort of go for a walk to kind of get the adrenaline levels down, and then spend, you know, and make sure I am prepared, as we talked about earlier. But then, like, probably the last 5 minutes, I would kind of do sort of those breathing / meditation, you know, like where you are just calming yourself down and just, you know, trusting that it will be okay. So I would do that. I don't know how I'll go doing that in the green room at the Sydney Writers Festival, but we shall see. We shall see.
Oh, for any of our viewers here that are in Sydney, maybe check out that one, and we can maybe put some placards up. We love you, Dinuka, just to make you feel right home.
Oh my God, there's so many people here.
And there'll be some friendly faces in the crowd. Now, before I let you go, Dinuka, I'm going to ask you very quickly for your top tips for publicity for a new author.
Yes. Actually, so I think we actually spoke about quite a few of them. You know, just
a couple of them did come up.
Yes. But look, one of the things that's really helped me out was really connecting with other debut authors who are going to come out at the same time that you are, like around about the same time, not necessarily the exact date. So again, through Twitter, you know, I connected with a whole bunch of other writers who all basically are coming out in 2022. And so we've all got sort of like this like WhatsApp group now and kind of email group. And that's just been honestly, it's been such a game changer for me because, you know, I'll be lying to, you know, be truthful to say that I was incredibly anxious before, you know, the release, because it is such a new thing that you're going through. And then to be able to just, you know, have a Zoom chat with all these other writers and basically be able to discuss the exact same worries and the exact same kind of insecurities and just kind of to like champion each other. That's been it's been such a, it's just been amazing. You know, it really has. And also we've been able to then champion each other's kind of social media and amplify each other's voices on social media in terms of, you know, retweeting each other's events and supporting each other's books when they come out. And, you know, so that whole group, we're basically like like a cheerleader group for each other, you know, and through that, and again, more importantly, we've actually made, again, lifelong friends, because now, you know, writers who, you know, I know through social media, but just through this group, I've just gotten so close to. And that probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for that little forum. So I think, yeah, just as a support group and as a group that champions each other, I think that's actually been one of the greatest things, if you can do that. And literally that was just on Twitter, you know, because someone put their hand up and went, hey, you know, does anybody want to be, you know, I'm coming out in 2022. Does anybody want to be part of a 2022 debut group? And we all went, yes, you know, and we all put our hands up and went, yes, I'll join that group. And that's literally how it started. But yeah, that's been amazing. So, you know, if you can do that, certainly do that. But yeah, but I mean, I think apart from that, I think like other top tips would be sort of to try and pace yourself, you know, because if you are, you know, like, and I think another writer actually told me this about how, you know, it's great to have events all kind of surrounding your release, but to try and get that stretched out a little bit more so that, you know, audiences keep kind of finding you, you know, after your release as well. And then, you know, and you should be like pitching to sort of libraries and things like that, just to make sure you have that kind of longevity when you know, when that first kind of initial buzz has kind of gone, you know. And I think it's also good for your own mental health, because it's quite exhausting, you know, like, you know, to try and, you know, so it's good to kind of spread it out on both accounts. So yeah.
Darlene has said it's fantastic that you found your writing people. She's still trying to find hers. And Pauline has commented that she's still looking too. Maybe Pauline and Darlene can catch up somewhere. Sometimes it can take a while to find the right group of people that you connect with. I mean, there's a million writers out there, but you've got to find the ones that connect with you, you know, on that personal level. But when you do, it's really fabulous. Kim has commented that she loves writing, loves how the writing community support each other. It's something that comes up just about every single Book Bites that I do, because it is such an important part of our journey. Anne has said that you are such a lovely, bubbly, enthusiastic woman. She can't wait to read The Torrent. I know Anne, and I think, Anne, you would really, really like it, to be honest. And Yvonne has a son-in-law who is an ex-policeman, and she's looking forward to your book. And again, is commenting you on what a beautiful person you are. And, you know, just on that, I only befriend beautiful people. Like, I don't befriend just anybody.
So funny. Thank you for saying that.
And Chrissy has said that it took her a while to find her tribe. And it will happen. Now, before I let you go, I'm just going to pop up the details of where people can find you, seeing as we have been talking a lot about social media. So this is where you can find Dinuka, online, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. And I'm going to put you on the spot. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but because you mentioned at the beginning that you are always prepared, and you mentioned something called the elevator pitch. And for those people outside of the industry, the elevator pitch is, it comes from the fact that if you happened, you know, as an emerging writer, if you happen to meet a publisher or an agent in an elevator, in a hotel, and you had that, you know, 30 seconds to pitch your novel to them, what would you say? That's where the term elevator pitch comes from. So for anybody watching who would like to read The Torrent, what is the elevator pitch for The Torrent, Dinuka?
Wow, okay, you have put me on the spot. Okay, so The Torrent... So The Torrent is basically a police procedural set in northern New South Wales, and it basically follows my protagonist, Kate Miles, who is a very heavily pregnant detective on her last week of work before she goes on maternity leave. And when we meet her, she is basically in the middle of investigating an armed holdup at a local fast food restaurant when she essentially gets asked by her boss to also review a separate case, which is an older case involving a death in floodwaters. So basically there was, the town went through summer flooding, and there was a number of kind of fatalities during that time, and she's asked to relook at one of those cases. So really from her boss's point of view, all she's required to do is kind of review that case file and write a quick report, but that's not how Kate works. And the story goes from there.
And I feel like now I should play some elevator music so that we feel like we're in the elevator.
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Dinuka, for our first Friday Book Bites of 2022. Sal said it was a great chat. Cassie says, thank you, that we've been excellent lunch companions. Lovely.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I just love this this thing, you know, because it's great, because it is perfect for lunchtime, because you can literally just eat your lunch and watch your favorite author. So it's awesome. Thank you so much, Sandy, for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Yvonne loves police procedurals. She's from up near Lismore. Yes. Maybe wait a month or so, Yvonne, before reading this. It might be a little raw for you at the moment. They've got lots of thank yous coming in. And Jeanette, it's very topical at the moment for Northern New South Wales. A thanks from Chrissy. A thanks from Kelly, and enjoyed the Sydney Writers Festival. Karen has also said thank you, and she's missed doing this at Friday lunchtime. So have I. So we're back now, so that's good. Pauline also enjoyed herself, as did Anne, as did everybody, of course, because you're just such a gorgeous person, Dinuka. And I'm so glad that we did become friends through our writing. Joe's happy that we're back for lunchtimes. And Jodie really enjoyed The Torrent, and just stick it at the top of your reading pile. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dinuka. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And I will draw the winner of the copy of The Torrent over the weekend. And we'll see you again for another Friday Book Bites another time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate it. Thank you.